From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide, in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, antitrust, secret subpoenas, ransomware. Microsoft's Brad Smith addresses it all, plus efforts to fight climate change and encourage racial equity across corporate America. And speaking of Microsoft, we've got the head of Xbox's game creator experience. We'll chat up the newest lineup of games, gameplay on TVs instead of consoles, and how the global chip crunch is affecting the supply chain. Plus, Apple debuts its Beats Studio Buds, hoping to capture a bigger share of the mass market. And there's new guidance on wearing masks at Apple stores and offices across the country. We'll have all the details. Those stories in a moment, but first, U.S. stocks staging a late rally today, set another record high. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has the details.
Yeah, it's tech leading the way. Not just tech, but the biggest tech companies driving U.S. equities higher. The NASDAQ 100, the most tech-heavy gauge, potentially, up by almost 1%. It's closing at a fresh record high. And as I said, the NYSE FANG Plus Index, that's that basket of mega-cap tech stocks and Chinese ADRs, up by 1.3%. Its best one-day gain since April. And you see semiconductors getting in on the act as well. In terms of specific names that are moving, it's really Apple leading the charge, up 2.5%. Its best one-day gain since March. The news? New headphones, Emily. $150 for Studio Buds, a lower price point. Wall Street basically saying this gives Apple access to the non-iOS crowd, a real boon for the stock, but also Netflix moving as well. One of the best gainers on the NASDAQ 100, up 2.2%. And really for them, it's about the Netflix shop. One Wall Street firm saying that it will increase reputation if it doesn't at least boost revenue. Coming into my Bloomberg terminal because tech has been on a hot streak. 7th consecutive day of gains. That's the best streak since back in December. And you'll remember it was at that time in December we were talking about, well, what happens to these tech stocks when the reopening starts, when the economy recovers? Those stocks that have been so successful during the pandemic, we saw interest rates starting to rise at the beginning of the year, and there were concerns. Well, we're in a pretty good pace relative to that. And the other big story, of course, cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, up above $41,000 at one point on Monday. It dipped a little bit below that towards the end of the session, above 39,000. You see we're hovering around 40,000 now. This comes after MUSK comments over the weekend. Of course, you'd expect nothing less that Tesla would resume accepting Bitcoin as payment for his vehicle once the creation of Bitcoin, the mining of Bitcoin was done with more sustainable sources of energy. And it's not just Bitcoin, Ethereum higher too. And that's taken the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index up 6.6% on Monday. Real biggest gain in around 3 weeks, but really it's a broad boon for cryptocurrencies. So often it's just Bitcoin that's the driver, but what we're seeing across that basket is a lot of positivity on Monday. Emily.
All right, what's a weekend without a comment on crypto from Elon Musk? Thanks so much, our Ed Ludlow. Meantime, in Washington, the head of the Justice Department's National Security Division is stepping down next week, marking the departure of a rare holdover from the Trump administration. This comes as he faces heat about what he knew regarding the agency's subpoenas for data from big tech companies, including Apple, Google, and Microsoft on U.S. lawmakers, journalists, and more. I spoke with Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith earlier about why he says these gag orders need to stop.
Well, I don't know that we know everything about what led to these investigations, but what we do know is clear. The DOJ used its authority in the Trump administration to pursue an investigation of these reporters and these people connected to Congress. Rather than serving a warrant on the individuals themselves, they went to the tech companies that had the emails or text messages and the like. They went to Apple, they went to Google, they went to Microsoft, and they not only served the warrant, they imposed gag orders, a non-disclosure order, and it wasn't until those expired that we were able to inform the targets of these probes, which I believe all of our companies did. And in some cases, that's when we first found out the magnitude of this. And now it has come to light, and I think it raises very squarely just a very critical issue about the way this law enforcement process should work.
So what do you still not know, and what are you still trying to find out?
Well, I think there are broad questions for the public as a whole. We don't live in a country where it's typical practice to see a law enforcement agency seizing records of reporters and elected members of Congress. I mean, it gets to almost fundamental issues of democracy. But I also think that it gets to a very important issue around technology. Before the cloud, if the government wanted your information, they basically had to go to your front door. They had to give you, the homeowner, a search warrant. You knew they were there. You could actually stand by and watch what was happening in many instances while they searched your home. You could then go to court yourself and file a protest if you thought the government went too far. We fundamentally believe, I think across the tech sector, that we need to restore that kind of balance. Because if we fail to do so, we undermine long-standing fundamental freedoms in the country. And frankly, for those of us in the tech sector, we're put in the middle, and that's not where we should be. This should be an issue where the government has to go most of the time to the individuals whose information they're seeking.
You have a very passionate op-ed out about this in the Washington Post, and I'm curious, you've tried to fight the government on this before, and it keeps happening. Can you share how often the government asks you for information on your users and how often you cannot tell those users about it?
Well, we file transparency reports every 6 months, and if you look at those, what you'll see is that we do get across the United States search warrants and subpoenas, typically in the thousands per year. Most of the time they're just looking for account records, but we do sometimes get these requests for data, for email, for documents, and we do sometimes get these non-disclosure orders. It's not a trivial percentage when you get to the consumers that are affected. It is very small when we get enterprise data. But we do typically fight them whenever we see a legal basis to do so. And one of the concerns we have is that this is not only an issue that's important for the United States, it's actually an issue that has broad international ramifications. Because the European governments are concerned about this. They're raising this today, every day in recent months with the Biden administration. They want to see new assurances and safeguards that the U.S. government isn't going to go to a U.S. court to ask a U.S. company to turn over data that belongs to Europeans. And until we get that sorted out, it is basically holding back, in our view, the tech sector in Europe.
Meantime, the FBI, we've also learned, has subpoenaed information from Trump White House counsel at the time, Don McGahn, and his wife, specifically from Apple. You talk about how these cases should be the rare exception and not the rule. In what case is it okay? In what case do you think that these kinds of requests are permissible?
Under really long-standing principles in the country, Emily, you would say that this kind of approach is okay when there is a concern that evidence will be destroyed before it can be obtained, or the safety of a witness might be put in jeopardy. It's these kinds of narrow exceptions. But I think what we're seeing in recent years is it's just easier and faster for prosecutors and investigators to go to a cloud company than to go to an individual or an enterprise, and they're taking the easy path. And that's where we do think that Attorney General Merrick Garland really needs to, we hope, take action here to strengthen Justice Department policy. We think Congress needs to codify stronger policy and law, and we think that the U.S. government needs to negotiate with our European allies to put international rules in place.
Meantime, a bipartisan group of House lawmakers has unveiled sweeping antitrust legislation aimed at Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon. When you look at this, what do you see as fair play, and what is not fair play?
I think we're in the relatively early stages of a broad conversation. You do see more concerns about the power of tech companies, ourselves included. People want to know what's the right balance between encouraging innovation and imposing more responsibility under the law. We're seeing this in Washington, we're seeing it in Brussels, we're seeing it around the world. I think in many ways where this is going is a particular focus on technology platforms that serve as gatekeepers. In other words, they not only serve as a platform like an operating system, but people need to go through them to sell their commerce, whether it's a product that's on Amazon or an app, say in the Apple App Store, or through a service like Google Search. And I think that's where we're going to see more and more government focus. That's where we're seeing a lot of the antitrust focus by states in the United States, especially when it gets connected to digital advertising. And I don't know what it will bring. I think it's too early to know. But you do see more of a common conversation around an agreed upon set of problems that people are trying to solve.
How concerned are you that at some point they may come back for Microsoft?
Well, there are aspects of the legislation that was introduced in the House last week that absolutely applies to Microsoft and many other companies. I think for all of us, it's the time to step back, try to think broadly, look beyond ourselves, and ask, what's the right role of technology to serve the economy, our customers, the country, and the world? There will be days when there are restrictions, and I think we can get our minds around it, and there will be days when there are restrictions that we think go too far, that undermine innovation, that basically undermine our ability to serve customers. It's all about balance, and that usually takes a while to figure out.
The ransomware attacks are only coming faster and more furiously, hitting Colonial Pipeline, the biggest meat producer in the United States. Are they only going to get faster and bigger? And how can we stop this?
Well, I do think that when we enter an era as we're now in, where there's ransomware as a service with basically financial syndication to support it, we are in a different period of time, and we all need to expect that there will be more attacks like this. I think the thing to keep in mind is that these kinds of cyber criminal groups will basically focus typically on organizations, nonprofits, government agencies, healthcare providers, small businesses that are vulnerable. And the reason they're vulnerable most of the time is frankly because people haven't moved to the cloud, or they're not patching their servers, or they're not applying cybersecurity best practices. So for those of us in the tech sector, we have to continue to make it easier for people to apply the protections that we're creating. And for everybody else, we have to embrace the need to actually put our cybersecurity house in order, put it in order before an attack rather than waiting until afterwards.
The trail in so many of these cases is leading back to hackers in Russia. I had a guest say we're at war with Russia, basically. The Russian government is not stopping this. What should the U.S. demand from the Russian government at this point? And would you agree with that characterization?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I would say this. Look, we live in a world where there are increasingly international norms. In some cases, they need to be strengthened, but fundamentally, they call on and require every government in every country to both exercise restraint itself as a nation state and ensure that the law prevents cyber criminals from running rampant around the world. And where governments are not doing enough to police the criminal organizations within their borders, that is an international issue. It should be discussed, even between heads of state. There should be a call on them to do more. And that's obviously one of the conversations I believe we'll see unfold this week when President Biden and President Putin sit down in Geneva.
Microsoft President Brad Smith there. We're going to hear more from him a bit later this hour. Coming up, the sky-high price to join Jeff Bezos aboard Blue Origin's first passenger flight. We're going to tell you everything we know so far about the winner of the auction who will join next month's historic New Shepard launch. That is next. This is Bloomberg. As we mentioned earlier, Apple has debuted a new product from its Beats line. The wireless Studio Bud earphones are now on sale for $150. They charge via a universal USB-C connector and have a dedicated Android app, making them more friendly to users outside the Apple ecosystem. AirPods continue to be seen as more of a premium product tailored to enhance Apple's other devices. Meantime, Apple plans to drop its mask requirement for vaccinated customers at many of its U.S. stores starting next week. Employees, however, will need to continue to wear them. They will not be required to ask customers for verification of vaccination. Blue Origin says the winner of the auction to join Jeff Bezos and his brother on an 11-minute trip to space will pay $28 million for that privilege. The hammer fell Saturday after weeks of bidding with more than 7,000 submissions from people in 159 countries. The identity of the winner won't be revealed for a few weeks, though. The New Shepard spacecraft can carry as many as 6 people on its trip. July 20th, we're going to continue to bring you all the updates. And Elon Musk has decided to sell his last remaining house. In a tweet, he announced he would put the Bay Area home he dubs a special place on the market. The decision comes a week after ProPublica reported that Musk, Bezos, and Warren Buffett paid little income tax relative to their wealth. Musk responded to the report saying he would keep paying California taxes in proportion to the time he spends in the state. He now primarily resides in a rented house in Boca Chica, Texas. Coming up, food delivery app DoorDash is growing its international presence and working to provide fast pet supplies to their owners. In an exclusive interview, I'm going to speak to the president of DoorDash, Christopher Payne, next. This is Bloomberg. DoorDash benefited from the pandemic boom in food delivery, of course, and now the app is expanding into Asia. And the company hopes a partnership with PetSmart will help it cater to pet owners, too. Joining us now with details, DoorDash President Christopher Payne. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us. So this partnership with PetSmart will bring pet supplies to DoorDash customers. I can tell you personally, I might need to use this. How big a market is pet supplies for you?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Today's a great announcement for us because we're announcing our partnership nationally with PetSmart, which will offer on-demand delivery from 1,500 PetSmart stores to DoorDash customers. A typical PetSmart has 11,000 items, pet food, as we were talking about before the break. You know, sometimes you run out of food and you need the food immediately, toys, treats. Couldn't be a more appropriate time for this announcement because over the pandemic, 44% or so of Americans actually welcomed a new pet into their home. Nearly half of those were first-time pet owners. And so I'm very, very excited as a pet owner to be able to announce our partnership today, going again beyond restaurants now into pet supplies and pet products.
You're also going global and bringing DoorDash to Japan, launching in a city northeast of Tokyo. How big a market is Japan for you, and what countries could be next?
Yeah, Japan represents our third country. We're in Canada and Australia today, and it's been a busy couple of weeks. We launched last week in Sendai, Japan, which is a major metropolitan area north, as you said, of Tokyo. It's the third largest economy, in the globe. But it's interesting. Tokyo, it's one of the most dense countries in terms of restaurant densities in the world. Tokyo is incredibly well served from a delivery point of view. However, a lot of the markets outside of Tokyo really have yet to connect local businesses to local consumers. And that's the vision of DoorDash. And so with this launch, we're now going to power restaurants and eventually other categories like pets and, as we did last year, convenience, to bring consumers in Japan what they want in minutes, not days.
So what could be next after Japan? I'm assuming you're looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see two of the main thrusts for DoorDash. You know, the Tony Xu, or founder's vision, is to connect the globe, all local businesses to all local consumers, not just restaurants, not just the United States. And so with the announcements we've made in the last few weeks, we did Rite Aid and convenience. We did a Bed Bath & Beyond announcement where we're powering their retail deliveries. Today's PetSmart announcement. You see in the United States us rapidly expanding beyond restaurants. Consumer expectations continue to rise as they want more and more products brought from local shops to their homes. That vision is not confined to the United States. And so today, Canada, Australia, and Japan, and in the future, there'll be others.
Everybody wants to know when new categories are coming, especially grocery. How close is grocery delivery to coming to DoorDash, and how popular do you expect it to be?
And one of the things we did early in the pandemic, as you may recall, I think I was on the show talking about our partnership with CVS at the time, is we felt like convenience was going to be very important for consumers during the pandemic. The ability to get staples, household products, as well as over-the-counter medication in minutes turned out to be incredibly powerful. We have partnerships with 7-Eleven, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and others. And so that was a powerful addition. It also created the platform for us to be able to go into grocery. So we have partnerships with Meijer and Hy-Vee, where we're beginning to pilot grocery delivery on DoorDash. Stay tuned for additional announcements, but it's very much a category that the DoorDash consumer will want delivered to them quickly.
Okay, we're staying tuned for sure. Look, what does all this expansion and growth mean for DoorDash workers? Will they be paid more as a result from delivering from more categories? We've got just about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, to me, this is one of the most exciting elements of going into new verticals. Often, for example, convenience is a late night or late afternoon. Same with grocery, early morning, late afternoon. It provides more opportunities for Dasher to earn throughout the day. We have over 1 million active Dashers on the platform. They earn an average of $25 an active hour when they're doing a delivery. And our expansion into new verticals only creates more opportunities for those millions of Dashers on the platform.
All right, Christopher Payne, we'll keep watching, staying tuned. As you say, DoorDash president. Thanks so much, Chris, for joining us. All right, coming up, highlights of the annual video game trade show E3 with big announcements from Microsoft. We're going to talk about it all with Xbox's new releases. Sarah Bond, Microsoft Corporate Vice President of Gaming Ecosystem, she will be joining us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Let's get back to financial markets, where it's been a rough day for one EV stock. Our Ed Ludlow is here with the latest. Ed, take it away.
This is Lordstown Motors, the would-be maker of electric pickup trucks. The stock falling almost 19% on Monday, the biggest drop on record. Not a very pretty picture. That's after both the CEO, Steve Burns, and CFO, Julio Rodriguez, both resigned. If we bring up pictures of them both, Steve Burns actually founded the company. This is one of the EV companies that elected to go public via a SPAC through a reverse merger the second half of 2020. Not only did they disclose that both executives have resigned, but they also concluded through an independent board investigation that the company has made inaccurate statements about some of its pre-orders. In some cases, they said that pre-orders came from fleets when they actually came from management companies and influencers who had no intention of buying them. 3-month chart of the stock, you can see the latest impact on the far left-hand side, but it was only last week, actually, that they disclosed they did not have enough cash to get to production, and if they didn't raise funds soon, that they would face bankruptcy. It has been a roller coaster ride for this company, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, hold on, that all sounds very familiar. This company also disclosed an SEC investigation back in March. Well, it's eerily similar to what happened to NIKOLA Corp. You'll remember that NIKOLA is a company that I've been covering really closely over the last 12 months. It, too, made some inaccurate statements, some exaggerated statements. Its founder, Trevor Milton, resigned. It faced an SEC investigation. What they both have in common is that those SEC investigations stem from a report by the same short seller Hindenburg Research. So definitely one to keep an eye on. The kind of SPAC EV story starting to unravel a little bit. And you can see what that's done to put pressure on the shares. Emily.
All right. I'd love that. Thanks much. Okay, moving on now to Microsoft. The annual video game trade show E3 is underway with this year's conference being done all virtual. Big announcements have come from publishers like Microsoft, Ubisoft, and Square Enix. This was Microsoft's first time participating in E3 since buying game publisher Bethesda last year for $7.5 billion, and the tech giant was keen to prove the deal was worth it. Joining us now to discuss, Sarah Bond, Corporate Vice President of Gaming Ecosystems at Microsoft. Sarah, good to have you with us. You showed off about 20 different games yesterday. Which of them do you think are really going to take off, and which are your personal favorites?
Well, it was a great day. We actually had 30 games in total, if you could believe it. 27 of them in Game Pass. And I'll tell you, it was real tough for me to pick a favorite. But the moment of the show that I loved the most was having Todd Howard from Bethesda open the show and introduce their new IP, Starfield, to the world, which I just cannot wait to play. So
how confident are you in Halo making it this fall? I noticed that Starfield has a specific release date for next fall, but we don't have a release date for Halo, and everybody wants to know.
yeah, I am very much looking forward to playing Halo this holiday when it launches. And frankly, one of the things that I'm most excited about that we're bringing to players is the whole lineup that we have through the rest of this year. We shared Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 4. My goodness, just looks beautiful. Sea of Thieves, A Pirate's Life, which my kids can't wait to play. And we have a ton of other games coming into the catalog as well, with 24 of them actually playable across console, across PC, and across all devices powered by Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is just incredible.
So does that mean you're confident we'll have Halo in time for the holidays?
Yeah, I feel great. I can't wait to play it. I don't know if you saw it, but it just looks fantastic.
All right. Meantime, you are charting the path to a console-less future where people could play your games on TVs, no console required. How soon could we see that? Will that be here before the holidays?
You know, it is always great to talk about the future, and there's always going to be a place in the world for the flagship console experience. It's just an incredible experience. But what we're really doing with the cloud is we're making it possible to extend that to all sorts of scenarios. You know, you can start playing in your living room in 4K and HDR and pick up and play on a mobile device. And that is what is so powerful, is that we really are building a future where it's possible for everybody to play any game they want with anyone, anywhere they want, which is frankly why I love what we do.
Well, speaking of the consoles, it's kind of hard to get an Xbox console if you didn't get one at the start of the pandemic. And Amy Hood, the CFO of Microsoft, of course, has said that's going to continue through the quarter. After June, though, are those supply constraints going to let up? When do you see it being more easy to get one if you want one?
Yeah, we have been actively working with console suppliers to make sure that we can meet the incredible demand for Xbox Series X and S. And I'll tell you, we really were humbled by the consumer reaction to what we created. You know, it takes years and years to build a piece of breakthrough hardware like that. And the reception has been incredible. And so we're continuing to work on that to make sure that we can bring the incredible experience to everyone.
So this push into cloud gaming, this console-less future, what does this mean for a company like GameStop, which of course has made its name selling consoles and, you know, hard copies of games themselves?
Well, at Xbox, we're all about choice, Emily. We want people to be able to play the games any way they want them and also buy the games any way they want them. And our partnerships with retail partners like GameStop are integral to that. Some people prefer to buy their hardware and their software in person. Some people prefer to do things digitally, and we're just giving everybody all of those options.
So with the new Amazon executive team at GameStop, does that mean you're bullish on whatever they have planned?
You know, I think when I look at GameStop, I'm excited that they're partners of ours because people love games. And having a retail partner and working with all of our retail partners is integral to giving people the experience they want.
All right. Sarah Bond, Corporate Vice President of Gaming Ecosystem at Microsoft. Sounds like it's going to be a busy and exciting holiday season. Thanks so much for joining us. Meantime, Apple is working on a new Apple Watch, new models and health features. Our Bloomberg Tech reporter Mark Gurman has all the details in this latest edition of Power Up.
I'm Mark Gurman with Bloomberg Technology, and on this week's episode of Power Up, I'll be taking a look at what to expect from the Apple Watch this year, next year, and in the years to come. For this year, for what's likely to be called the Apple Watch Series 7, Apple's planning a substantial update with an updated display, a faster processor, and new wireless technology. For the new wireless tech, Apple's testing an upgraded version of its ultra-wideband tech using the AirTag's item finder. It's also planning a faster processor and an updated display. For that new screen, Apple is testing a new lamination technique that will bring the display closer to the cover glass to have an overall nicer experience. The company is also testing narrower borders to make the overall form factor look a bit smaller and make the display appear bigger. For next year, for what's likely to be called the Series 8, Apple is testing a more iterative update to that flagship watch in addition to a refresh to the Apple Watch SE. That's the lower cost model launched last year. The company is also testing a new Explorer Edition or Adventure Edition aimed at hikers and extreme sports athletes. Apple's also working on at least 2 major new health sensors for future versions of the Apple Watch. The first is a body temperature sensor to get your temperature, which would have been handy over the pandemic, now from your wrist. The company originally aimed to include that in this year's Apple Watch model, but now it's likely to arrive next year with the Series 8. The company is also working on a blood sugar or glucose sensor to make the lives of diabetics easier. Currently, you have to prick your finger to get blood, but Apple's goal is continuous non-invasive blood sugar monitoring through your skin via the Apple Watch. That sensor is likely many years away. I'm Mark Gurman. This is Power Up.
Coming up, Wall Street is getting a bit more crowded as Goldman Sachs has announced a full return to the office for most of its employees. We'll check in on what policies big tech is implementing next. This is Bloomberg.
We decided to be proactive. We know that we wanted to go for pre-clearance with SEC and look, we know that that we want to set the bar in transparent financial reporting. And yes, it may have taken a little longer than we expected, but today we're happy to share what we've done in Q1. We beat our targets.
Grab CEO Anthony Tan there speaking about his optimism that the merger between his ride-hailing company and a U.S. blank check firm will be completed by the end of the year. The deal with Altimeter Growth was due to close in July, but has now been delayed to the fourth quarter as Grab works on an audit of its financials. A big SPAC we are watching. Meantime, Wall Street got a little busier this week. Goldman Sachs asked nearly all of its employees to return to its downtown office Monday morning. It's in stark contrast to the bank's neighbor, Citigroup, which says workers won't return until July. And even then, many can work on a hybrid schedule. Big tech companies also taking different strategies, from Amazon announcing staff will work 3 days a week in the office to Salesforce, which is adopting a fully remote model for most of its workers. Joining me now on the future of remote work is Slack's Chief People Officer, Nadia Rawlinson. Salesforce, of course, recently agreed to acquire Slack. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us. So why are we seeing such big differences between companies in the same industry as to how to approach this?
Well, I think different industries have different approaches to how they're viewing their workforce. For us at Slack, we want to put our people first. We think a digital-first approach to the future of work is where the industry and all companies will be heading.
Does that mean you think that companies that are forcing workers to return to the office will lose talent?
I definitely think it will be harder to find the best and the brightest if there are such different ways of approaching work. At Slack, we believe that we aren't going back to the way things were. We are working as we have been working since March 2020, and we've been productive, we've been creative, and we've been able to be effective. So let's take those learnings and bring them into the future and establish them across the company.
But there are a lot of nuances here, and I wonder if you could explain how you're addressing some of the complicating factors. What are the rules for executives, for example? Do the same rules apply to them that apply to everyone else?
Absolutely. It all starts from the top. So for instance, we've gotten rid of all of our executive floors and dedicated offices in all of our buildings. We've also asked our executives not to come in for more than 3 days a week because people will follow. If they think their leaders are in, they'll come in too. We really want people to embrace the digital first perspective, and it all starts with all of our leaders.
But there must be some challenges, and I'm curious what challenges you're seeing. And if you're at all concerned that this is the way we feel now, but a year from now, 2, 3 years from now, if the world bounces back, perhaps even more to a more office-centric culture, if then Slack has to rescind some of the freedoms it gave its employees this year?
Well, I think two things are important to that. One, I think it's important to always listen to your people and to take an experimental mindset. So not be locked in on this is the way it will be forever. But two, I think our perspective is that we're not going to snap back to sort of habits that we have had over the generations. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity that the pandemic has provided us to rethink and reshape the way that we work. And we've proven that it's possible. So we think that's going to be the way of the future.
How does this play out in Slack's products? I mean, conventional wisdom would lead one to believe that if more people go back to the office, less people use Slack.
Well, I think it's proven that people have been using Slack before the pandemic and have continued to, and even in greater numbers after the pandemic. And once that people have been using the product, it's been something that they found has made them more collaborative, more productive, easily to connect with people, understand information and decision-making, and creating a more transparent culture. All those things are positive effects of the product itself and also other digital tools that are out there to enable this type of work.
So how do you see this all shaking out in terms of the war for talent? I mean, is there going to be a sort of redistribution of people, or are they all going to go to the companies that are more flexible?
I definitely think that this will be table stakes, that having flexibility is going to be one of the key tenets that talent's going to look for in the future. For instance, for us, we believe Slack is our HQ, not a physical location or an office. That's a tool in our toolkit to use for specific types of work. So collaboration, team building, project kickoffs, et cetera. This has also allowed us to hire people outside of where our physical buildings are. Over the last few months, we've seen a trend where over half of our remote-based employees are underrepresented minorities. So we've been able to be even more inclusive and get talent where talent resides, not just where our offices are. So it's a net positive all around.
Well, that is certainly where the numbers show that Slack has outperformed its peers, especially on diversity and inclusion. Nadia Rawlinson, Slack Chief People Officer, thanks so much for taking the time to join us and share your perspective and approach. Okay, coming up, lots more from Microsoft's Brad Smith, including fighting climate change and creating racial equity, not just at Microsoft, but across technology. That is next. And Etsy was one of the biggest movers on the S&P Monday. Bloomberg Intelligence saying sales from the e-commerce retailer could grow by double digits in each of the next 5 years. Amazon, meantime, is expected to lead the charge, but smaller companies like Etsy are also expected to do well due to price, convenience, and of course, innovation. This is Bloomberg. Earlier this hour, we heard from Brad Smith of Microsoft on hot topics of the day, like ransomware, privacy, antitrust. But Microsoft, like other tech companies, also plays a significant role in reaching goals in the effort to fight climate change. I spoke to Smith about that and more earlier today. Take a listen.
Well, we've learned a lot in the year and a half since we embarked on our own, very broad ambition to be carbon negative as a company by the end of the decade. One of the things we've learned is, frankly, it's all about measurement. unless we can all measure carbon emissions the same way in every organization around the world, we're really not going to have a basis for confidence that we're making progress. The second thing we've learned is shareholders care about this issue. They increasingly want to know what companies are doing when they're making investment decisions. We filed comments with the SEC today. We strongly endorse the SEC embarking down a path with rulemaking. It's going to have to do it on an incremental, sort of step-by-step basis, because I think we all have to start by rallying really around the need to create a common basis for standardized measurement around the world. And as these measurement systems get better, I think it will connect very closely with the need for transparency and accountability. Starting in just 2 weeks, part of my pay will be based in the next fiscal year on whether Microsoft makes progress in reducing our carbon emissions. I think this is something that people are going to want to see out of executives around the world. They're going to see it out of companies, of governments, and nonprofits. The SEC is playing an important role in helping to spur what I really believe is one of the most, frankly, important movements of a generation.
Well, and on that note, even if Microsoft meets its climate goals, that doesn't mean the rest of the world will. What are you doing? What is Microsoft doing to help others along that path?
Well, I think we have a very important role to play in multiple ways. I mean, first, we've got to get our own house in order, as we're focused on doing. But second, we're working with our suppliers in our supply chain to strengthen measurement systems to help them reduce emissions. This will be like so many other issues. It will need to be automated. It will require world-class technology that organizations of every size can use to record and report and ultimately reduce their emissions. And we're leaning in there as well. This is going to be a big priority for us in the months ahead as a company to provide technology to support our customers.
Now, Brad, it's been disclosed that Microsoft's board, I have to ask you this, back in 2019 received a complaint about an affair that Bill Gates had with an employee in the year 2000. You have responded to this, and I wonder, will Microsoft be taking any more steps to conduct an investigation into Bill Gates' behavior when he was CEO, chair, or on the board? I know he does still meet with Satya and employees on product from time to time. Will those meetings continue?
Well, let me just say this. Our board looked at this issue in the past. Bill made a decision to resign from the board. We feel very good about the investigation that we pursued, and in particular, the focus on the individual who raised the concerns, because I think that's something we've all learned in recent years, to really, frankly, focus on the needs of the claimant, the victim, and we did that. What I will say more than anything else is the Microsoft of 2021 is very different from the Microsoft of the year 2000. The world of 2021 is very different from the world in 2000. For a lot of good reasons, there's a lot that happened in the year 2000 that would not be considered acceptable today. But as we look to the future, I feel very good about the safeguards we have in place, the policies that we have in place, really the culture that under Satya we built to address this issue, and we'll stay focused on it.
So on that note then, will Gates still have an influence on the company? Even if he is an advisor of sorts in these product meetings, even as the company is changing, this is Satya's company, this is your company, this is the company of all the employees who work there today.
Well, I think you'll see us continue to talk to Bill in an appropriate way on issues that matter. Look, we're talking about SEC comments today about climate change. I have to say, I've probably learned as much from Bill Gates on climate as anyone else I've had the chance to talk to. I think Bill is doing more to address climate change than almost any other person. Where there are opportunities for us to work together in an appropriate way, in a way that's sensitive to all of the issues that people have raised, we will continue to benefit from his advice. And I think you'll see Bill himself want to address these in a very responsible way.
Okay, speaking of responsibility, Microsoft has just released a major racial equity report with a multi-year plan about what you plan to do, goals you're setting. What are the most important things that you see in this plan to keep Microsoft on the leading edge of the culturally informed workplace?
There's really two dimensions, I think, for all of us who are in the business community when it comes to racial equity. First, how do we do a better job as businesses in creating opportunities, for example, for the Black and African American community in this country, to not only enter our workforce and workplace, but rise and have the opportunities to succeed and be promoted. And that's why we're very committed to increasing our representation.
Brad Smith, Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer there on a range of topics. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow, we have an exclusive interview with Stripe co-founder and president John Collison. That'll be a fascinating conversation. Do not miss it. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.